"You people don't usually sit here," the officer muttered, lips curled into a smirk. 10 seconds later, she made a phone call. 10 minutes later, the airline wished it had never opened its mouth. The heels clicked first. Sharp, intentional, like a metronome of success. Alamone Johnson walked the way some people signed contracts with elegance, certainty, and zero hesitation. Her cream-colored pantsuit was pressed so precisely it looked stitched by silence. The champagne satin blouse underneath swayed gently. As she moved, its bow tied at her throat, like a final word no one dared argue with, behind her. The international terminal at JFK buzzed like any other weekday afternoon. Business travelers scanned screens. Families herded toddlers. Pilots strode with wheels in tow like choreographed shadows. She was headed for Gate A17, Flight 8-4, to Zurich. But at the edge of the gate, standing like a sentry assigned by the past, was a man in a navy blazer with an airline pin on his lapel, and a face weathered by boredom and bias. Officer Lane, that was his name, sat on his chest like a warning label. Alla didn't care to read. He looked her up and down. The tailored fit, the glint of gold on her watch, the smooth, deep brown skin, pressed shoulder-length hair that flowed without apology. And then came the question. "Excuse me, ma'am, this line's for first-class passengers?" Alla didn't. "Stop walking." She simply tilted her head slightly, enough for him to hear. "I know." But Lane didn't move. He stepped in front of her now, an unnecessary gesture of gatekeeping. "I'm gonna need to see your boarding pass." She stopped. The moment had arrived. She'd been here before at different airports. Different men, same script. "You didn't ask the man before me," Ayla said calmly. He had his badge out. He also didn't stop walking. "I just need to confirm you're in the right place." Alla took a slow breath. No anger, just poise. She reached into her structured black tote and pulled out the sleek black leather case containing her passport and boarding pass. She held it out not like a concession, but like a queen offering evidence only because she chose to. Lane barely glanced at it before muttering, "Must have upgraded last minute." Ayla's brow lifted. "Excuse me? These seats are usually booked solid? Surprised there was one left." "You're not surprised the seat was available. You're surprised I took it." He laughed a forced, dry chuckle. "Don't take it personal." She took it professionally. She dialed a number. "Activate runway protocol," she said into the phone.
Ow.
The phone hadn't even left her ear when the air around Gate A17 began to change. Ayla's voice had been calm. To command that calmness was exactly what Officer Lane didn't understand. Most people, when confronted with disrespect wrapped in policy, either argued or shrank. She didn't either. She delegated ended the call in 3 seconds. She didn't need to repeat herself. People who knew her never needed more than once. "Is there a problem here?" came a voice behind Lane. He turned, caught off guard by the arrival of a young woman in a sharp red blazer with a walkie clipped to her belt. The woman looked worried, not because she recognized Ayla, but because her comms unit was already buzzing. "I've got it handled," Lane said, flashing his badge like a sword. "No, you don't," Alla said. That was the moment other passengers started to look. Some paused mid-scroll on their phones. Others lowered their carry-ons, sensing tension that wasn't loud, but heavy. The red-blazered woman stepped forward. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. Can I just verify you'll want to speak to your supervisor?" Ayla interrupted. "Your airline's corporate director, whoever's next up the food chain? Because your systems are about to lock down." Lane's scoff was loud. "Look, lady, I'm just doing my job." "No," Ayla said. "You're doing your habit. But now it's costing you." 4 terminals away, in a glass-walled office above the Delta Executive Lounge, a silent alert flashed across a secure screen. "Runway protocol activated. Client ID, a Johnson Level 1 clearance. Initiate Tier 1 asset. Response, immediate review required." Within 90 seconds, 2 things happened. First, the airline's regional operations director received a call from someone she did not expect to hear from until the next quarter. Second, a man in a tailored dark gray suit with a subtle pinstripe Robert Hemmings, VP of Global Partnerships, was paged by name over the intercom. "Robert Hemmings, Please report to Gate A17 immediately. Priority 1 client present. Hemmings hadn't moved that fast since his last contract bonus. Alla Monet Johnson was not just a CEO, she was the CEO of Monet Infrastructure Group, a black-owned multinational development firm responsible for projects spanning 5 continents' airports, water systems, smart roads, urban renewables. If your plane landed safely in Johannesburg, Nairobi, Accra, or even half of Europe's B terminals, it likely touched a runway her company helped design, build, or consult. But people didn't see that when she walked through terminals. They saw a woman. They saw black. They saw soft silk and high heels. What they didn't see until it was too late was that she didn't need permission. She was the protocol. Lane was still explaining to no one in particular how policies existed for a reason when a commotion near the gate pulled his attention. Robert Hemmings was sprinting, not walking, not hurrying. Sprinting. He was red-faced by the time he reached. "Them, Ms. Johnson," he said breathlessly. "Ma'am, I am deeply sorry. Please allow me to personally escort you to your seat." Lane blinked. "Wait, escort? Who is she?" "She," Robert said, turning slowly toward Lane with fire in his eyes, "is the woman whose team built the very landing systems you take for granted every time your flight touches down." Lane's lips parted. No sound came out. Ayla didn't say a word. She simply turned to Robert and said, "Make sure this gate never forgets today." Robert nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, ma'am." The lounge had fallen into a hush. No one clapped. No one dared. Ayla walked through the first-class doors without looking back. The officer who mocked her stood still, face pale. She didn't need to celebrate. She didn't need to scold. She'd already won the one battle that mattered most. She made the system apologize. And somewhere, on a back-end server, a note was added to her profile in bold. "Do not delay question or inconvenience. This client owns the runway." By the time Flight 824 reached cruising altitude over the Atlantic, Alla had already answered 6 emails, restructured a pitch deck, and declined an invitation to speak at an energy conference in Berlin. She was halfway through editing a keynote speech when the cabin manager nervously approached. "Ms. Johnson," the woman said, voice soft but trembling. We'd like to offer you a personal gift as an apology. We have Dom Perignon, caviar." Alla didn't look up from her tablet. "No need. Apologies are protocol, not personal." The manager faltered, unsure what to do with her hands. Alla lifted her gaze, cool and clear. "But you can start by making sure your officers receive bias de-escalation training. Real training. It's not the video you make them sleep through during onboarding." The manager flushed. "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Then I'll accept the champagne." 10 rows behind her. A passenger had filmed the entire Gate A17 incident, starting from Officer Lane's first comment to the arrival of Robert Hemmings. The video hit Twitter before the plane even left the tarmac. At Executive T, a black woman in a cream suit just shut down JFK's gate. A17 in 10 minutes. She made a call, and the airline VP ran. "I need to know who she is. Hashtag Black Excellence. Hashtag CEOUNBOTHERED. Hashtag Runway to Power within hours." The hashtags trended in 3 countries. By the time the flight landed in Zurich, Alla Monet Johnson was no longer just a CEO in motion. She was a symbol, a headline, a warning, and a weapon. The Zurich Grand was a palace disguised as a hotel. 6 black cars waited for arriving delegates. Only one was bulletproof. Ayla stepped out of the jet bridge into a press swarm that wasn't supposed to be there. Cameras clicked. Flashes fired. Someone yelled, "Ms. Johnson, did you really threaten the airline?" She turned once briefly. "I didn't threaten anyone," she said. "I reminded them who owned the ground beneath their wheels." That line made it to CNBC, Reuters, and Essence magazine within hours. 15 years earlier, Ayla sat in the back of a lecture hall at Harvard Business School, her laptop open but untouched. The professor, a man with silver hair and the charisma of stale bread, paced the stage, quoting Warren Buffett like scripture. "When He paused to ask, "What do you think real power looks like?" The answers flew. Money, influence, titles. Ala raised her hand. "Power," she said, "is when the system can't operate without you and it knows it." The professor laughed politely. The boys in front of her smirked. But one man leaned, sharp-jawed, sitting 5 rows upturned to look at her. She never forgot his face. Malcolm Ford, her future rival. The man who, years later, would try to humiliate her on an international stage. Malcolm Ford was CEO of Skywell Ventures, a direct competitor to Isla's infrastructure firm. He had contracts in Canada, Brazil, and the UAE. More importantly, he had the ego of an oil tycoon and the mindset of a chess player who played with real kings. And he hated that Ayla kept beating him. What Ayla didn't yet know. What she was about to find out was that Officer Lane didn't act alone. A private email had been sent 2 days earlier to JFK's operations staff, questioning the validity of Ayla's travel credentials and suggesting her seat had been compromised by a duplicate booking. That email? It came from a shell subsidiary of Skywell. It was all a setup, and Ayla had walked right into it. At 9 p.m. Zurich time, Ala sat in a glass conference room on the 58th floor of the Artemis Tower. Around her sat 11 executives from 4 countries. Her company's board of directors powerful, skeptical, and predominantly white. They had seen the video. Some were proud, some were nervous. One, Harold Grayson, chairman, mid-60s, British, leaned forward. "Ms. Johnson," he said, "may I speak plainly?" "You always do," Ayla replied, flipping through her tablet without looking up. "This incident, while empowering, has created noise. Headlines, exposure. That noise made our name trend in 12 markets." "Yes, but not all investors appreciate drama." Ala finally looked up, and perhaps they should invest in silence. No one spoke for a moment, then Harold nodded slowly. "Carry on." And just like that, she secured her position again. Zurich, 2:27 a.m. The Artemis Tower was silent. But Ayla's mind wasn't. She sat alone in the private lounge connected to her suite, the lights low. Jazz playing quietly, her silk robe wrapped like armor. A glass of chilled mineral water sat, untouched, on the table. Her tablet glowed with lines of metadata from the airline's internal systems. When the video of her confrontation went viral, she knew immediately this wasn't random. People like Officer Lane didn't just spontaneously pick targets like her. They were nudged. Someone whispered. Someone planted doubt. She zoomed into the duplicate booking log that caused the so-called error at gate A17. 2 bookings under her name, 1 real, 1 fake, created from a third-party system in Boston. Ayla's fingers flew. She traced the fake ticket back through the masking layers, proxies, shell domains, contract services. It took her an hour. She didn't breathe once. Then she saw it. Registrant, Selma Cove Logistics LLC, parent company, Ford and Crown Holdings. Her eyes narrowed. Malcolm Ford. He wasn't just trying to humiliate her. He was testing how far he could go. Boston, 2011. Ala was 28 and fearless, but still human. She had just finished pitching her first solo infrastructure design to a city council in Cambridge and nailed it. Her design was cleaner, more efficient, and cheaper than anything the city had seen in years. The mayor's office called her that night. "Impressive work," they said. "We'll be moving forward." She bought a new pair of pumps the next day. Then came the email. Fortunately, due to revised bidding procedures, the contract has been awarded to another party. That party, Malcolm Ford's firm, he hadn't just underbid her. He'd used her own design, rerouted, and rebadged. Through a former intern who left her company 2 weeks prior, she had no proof, only rage. She cried in her office that night and vowed never to be outmaneuvered again. Zurich, 2:27 a.m. The Artemis Tower was silent, but Ayla's mind wasn't. She sat alone in the private lounge connected to her suite, the lights low. Jazz playing quietly, her silk robe wrapped like armor. A glass of chilled mineral water sat, untouched, on the table. Her tablet glowed with lines of metadata from the airline's internal systems. When the video of her confrontation went viral, She knew immediately this wasn't random. People like Officer Lane didn't just spontaneously pick targets like her. They were nudged. Someone whispered. Someone planted doubt. She zoomed into the duplicate booking log that caused the so-called error at gate A17. 2. Bookings under her name, one real, one fake. Created from a third-party system in Boston, Ayla's fingers flew. She traced the fake ticket back through the masking layer's proxies, shell domains, contract services. It took her an hour. She didn't breathe once. Then she saw it. Registrant, Selma Cove Logistics LLC parent company, Ford and Crown Holdings her. Eyes narrowed. Malcolm Ford. He wasn't just trying to humiliate her. He was testing how far he could go. Boston, 2011. Ayla was 28 and fearless, but still human. She had just finished pitching her first solo infrastructure design to a city council in Cambridge and nailed it. Her design was cleaner, more efficient, and cheaper than anything the city had seen in years. The mayor's office called her that night. Impressive work, they said. We'll be moving forward. She bought a new pair of pumps the next day. Then came the email. Fortunately, due to revised bidding procedures, the contract has been awarded to another party. At Malcolm Ford's firm. He hadn't just underbid her. He'd used her own design, rerouted, and rebadged. Through a former intern who left her company 2 weeks prior, she had no proof, only rage. She cried in her office that night and vowed never to be outmaneuvered again. Back in Zurich, she picked up the red line phone from her suite's desk. This line connected to only one person, Rodrigo, she said when the call clicked in. Activate red smoke. There was a pause. Just the target? He asked in his Chilean accent. For now, she said, but I want a dossier. Friends, shell companies, hidden contracts. Show me every crack in his empire. Rodrigo hesitated, then asked softly, You want exposure or destruction? Allah smiled for the first time in hours? Both. As the city slept, Allah stared at a giant screen mounted to the wall. It showed live metrics of her company's Reach Monet Infrastructure Group. 17 airports, 9 governments. 2 defense contracts pending approval, every project she ever touched. Stood because she had vision, because she turned trauma into architecture, grief into glass, rage into regulation. She thought about every time she'd been underestimated. Then she whispered to the room, You should have stopped me before I knew your name. The email came at 4:12 a.m. encrypted. No subject line. No sender. No footer. Just a PDF attachment titled Ford Internal _ Terminal Override. Doc Sala didn't open it on her main tablet. She used a secure burner device Rodrigo had left for moments. Exactly like this, as the file opened. Her breath caught. There it was, a detailed email thread between Skywell executives discussing an opportunity to destabilize Monet Infrastructure's leadership optics ahead of a government contract. Review in Nigeria the plan. Create a minor international incident at a travel hub using Ayla's itinerary. Undermine her authority. Leak the footage anonymously. Let the press do the rest. It was signed Malcolm Sent from his own private server. He hadn't even encrypted it because he thought she'd never see it. The next morning, Alice stood in a tailored steel gray pantsuit with satin trim and a sharp collar that made her look more like a commander than a CEO. Her skin glowed against the morning. Zurich light. Her curls were pulled into a regal knot. Her crown black and brilliant. At 10 a.m., she walked into the World Infrastructure Forum and stole the room. Before saying a word, dozens of reporters buzzed in the back. Her assistant whispered, They want a statement. Alla glanced over her shoulder and said, Give them something simple. She walked to the podium. Her voice didn't waver. The world doesn't crumble because a black woman claims her seat. It crumbles when we let men like Malcolm Ford decide who deserves one. Silence, then flashbulbs, then headlines. That night, she called in Rodrigo Amani, her legal head, and Jules, her PR chief. They sat around her suite's glass table. I want you to leak the document, Allah said calmly. Imani raised an eyebrow. That would start a legal war. I'm counting on it. Jules leaned in. Won't that expose our source? No, Ayla said, sliding over another tablet. Oh, because we're going to edit the leak to hide the part where I received it. And we're going to timestamp it 3 weeks earlier, suggesting the press. Had it before I did? Rodrigo whistled low. That's cold, Noela replied. That's precise. Within 48 hours of the leak, Skywell's stock dropped 19%. The Nigerian government suspended its contract review with Ford's firm. Business. Insider ran a headline, Did Malcolm Ford orchestrate a racial incident to win a contract? Malcolm released a video denying all involvement, but his eyes told the truth. And Ayla, she didn't respond publicly. Just let the world interpret the silence. Because sometimes silence isn't weakness, it's dominion. Back in New York a week later, Ala was back at JFK Terminal 4. Same designer luggage. Same graceful glide. This time, the airline CEO personally greeted her at the gate. A velvet rope was placed around her seat in first class. Champagne flute. Waited on the trade officer lane. Fired Malcolm Ford. Subpoenaed Dadanala. She sat in seat 1A, unfolded her tablet, and drafted a new global infrastructure policy to present at the G20 summit. No headlines, no cameras, just power. Back in Manhattan, Ala sat in her penthouse's tech lab, a minimalist chamber filled with encrypted servers, biometric locks, and the most advanced firewall technology outside the Pentagon. The black card lay flat on the table, under a cool, white beam of light. No name, no number, just the gold grid under the black triangle. Rodrigo leaned over it with a scanning lens. It's not a card, he said. It's a key. To what? Chico tapped a small chip embedded in the corner. This symbol's been showing up on deep contracts, political campaign funds, shipping bids, arms infrastructure, private groups using ghost donors. I've seen it only once before, on a cancelled Mongolian rail project tied to a shell in Qatar. Bella frowned. What's it called? Rodrigo's voice dropped. They call it the Grid. A secret syndicate of global financiers and political operatives who fund industrial influence, but never show their names. They don't just lobby, they rewrite laws. Ayla's jaw clenched. I just woke them up. Rodrigo looked at her. No, you just made them nervous. Later that night, Ayla searched her encrypted files for references to the Grid. Nothing. Came up directly. But she had a theory. Someone inside. Company had crossed paths with them. She combed through project bids from the last 5 years, and there it was. A signed consulting agreement for a rare minerals project in the Congo. She recognized every name on the list except one. Row 17, consultant, redacted. But Rodrigo decrypted the metadata and recovered the original name. Quentin Vale, the man who mentored her. The man who warned her. He wasn't just connected. He was part of the Grid. Her breath slowed. Spine didn't. She picked up her phone and made the call. Imani, she said. You have a name. Schedule the press. The next day, Ala walked into the studio of Global Capital Weekly, the most watched financial broadcast in the U.S. The host, Eric DeSantos, had a reputation for ambush interviews. Ala knew this. She wore her battle dress anyway. A pure white power suit with black contrast trim, her natural curls pulled into a tight low bun. Her heels sharp enough to draw blood. The studio lights came on. Eric smiled like a predator. Miss Johnson, he said, you've been at the center of a PR hurricane lately. Are you proud of it? Or just addicted to being the story? Ayla didn't blink. I don't respond to addiction metaphors from men who've never been followed. Through airports? The crew stifled a laugh. Eric leaned in. You leaked a private email. You tanked a competitor's company. Don't you think that was excessive? Ala met his stare. When power is abused quietly, justice must speak loudly. Then she leaned forward. You want the real story? Fine. I'll give you an exclusive. Quentin Vale, chair of the infrastructure. Task Force has been taking undisclosed consulting payments from a ghost syndicate operating beneath global construction contracts. Eric froze. You have proof? smiled coldly. Tune in at 6 p.m. tonight. By evening, Ayla's team had released the full timeline, encrypted documents, ghost contracts, payment flows, and a visual map showing how Quentin Vale had funneled influence into 3 illegal overseas bidding rings. All masked behind the grid's shell system, her post read, "If you come for my seat, bring receipts." I did. The media exploded. Senate. Inquiries were announced within 24 hours. Quentin Vale disappeared from public view, but Ayla knew better. He hadn't vanished. He had retreated, and the grid, they were watching now. It happened at 3:03 a.m. Allah's secure. Ghanaian operations server, the backbone of her upcoming Pan-African transit project, went dark. Not a crash, a kill command. Her CTO called her mid-flight. "We didn't lose the data," he said. "We lost the entire server string. Fried internally, as if it melted from the inside." Ayla's response was instant. Is it isolated? Should be. But the signature. It's identical to what hit Tesla's Berlin lab last year. Rodrigo patched in. That wasn't a hack. That was grid-level sabotage. They were sending a message, not to break her business. To cripple her credibility in Africa, her deepest stronghold, Ayla didn't panic. She whispered only one word. Backup. 3 seconds later, her offshore servers kicked in. Every file restored, every contract preserved, and every system rerouted to a location they didn't know existed. Ayla hadn't built her empire hoping for safety. She'd built it expecting war. 2 days later, Ayla was standing on red soil. In Accra, Ghana, looking at the freshly cleared site of her $1.2 billion transit initiative, a project that would connect 5 West African capitals through high-speed rail, but something was wrong. The blueprint container, a secure steel box used to store printed plans on construction sites, had been unlocked. Its seal broken inside. Everything was soaked in something dark. It wasn't ink. It was goat blood, and painted on the back wall in thick. Deliberate strokes. Stay in the sky. The earth isn't yours. Ayla stood silently. Her team waited for her reaction. She didn't blink. She didn't flinch. Instead, she turned to her foreman and said, "Double the security. Hire local. Pay them well. And make sure every woman on this site is paid more than the last man who quit." Then she looked at the message again and smiled. "They're threatening me with ancient symbols. That means they're out of modern weapons." Back in her hotel room, Ayla sent a higher resolution scan of the blood message to Rodrigo. Hours later, he called back, voice tight. It wasn't just a threat. It's a code. Hidden in the paint pattern, Old Morse, masked in symbol. Curvature. What's the message? Rodrigo hesitated. Protocol Ishtar active, seat 3F, Rome, 704. Ayla stared at the phone. Ishtar protocol, a term she'd seen only once, buried in a 13-year-old NATO memo about female-led destabilization. Cells in financial warfare, seat 3F, Rome, 7.04. Today was July 1st. She had 3 days to find out who was in that seat, or someone would use that seat to finish what Malcolm started. This wasn't about power anymore. It was about elimination. Ayla landed in Rome under an alias's private jet, no manifest. Her Italian contact met her with a vintage Jaguar and a silent nod. Within 40 minutes, she was positioned inside Leonardo da Vinci Airport. Disguised in a long camel trench coat, oversized sunglasses, and low heels. No guards, no tech, just instinct. She located Gate 14, where flight AZ-342 to Istanbul was boarding, seat 3F. She stood in the shadows as a tall, striking woman with scarred cheekbones, gray-streaked braids, and a walk like a soldier sat down with. Calm precision. No luggage. No expression. Ayla's heart stopped. It was Amara Thorne, her former co-strategist. Declared dead 9 years ago after a failed op in Lagos, but there she was, alive. Calm. Reading a newspaper with the grid's insignia barely visible on the front fold, Ayla intercepted her in the lounge. "I buried you," she said softly. Amara didn't flinch. "I asked you to. You refused. A while, so you joined them. Amara set the paper down. I didn't join. I infiltrated, and now I'm surrounded. Silence pulsed. Then Amara leaned in. You've awakened them. Ala Ford was small. Vale was ego. But the ones above them, they don't play stock games. They collapse currencies. Why? Seat 3F. Because it was mine before I disappeared. A signal. A warning. And an invitation. To what? To end this. Ayla studied her old ally. I came to stop them. Good, Amara said, because I've already started. That night in a shadow-drenched cafe near the Vatican, Amara slid Ayla a flash drive across the table. Inside this are the routing. Contracts for 6 shell companies tied to grid funding. But it's missing one thing. What? The target? It's the name of the person they're planning to remove? Ala froze. They're not coming for me? Amara stared back. Not directly. They want to start a chain collapse. Remove one key figure from a Central African financial summit. That death will tank the currency. It's a trigger investment flight across the region, Allah whispered. That would erase 5 years of economic growth. Amara nodded. And they'll blame it on instability. It'll look like policy. Failure. They'll sweep in with reconstruction loans and own the continent by winter. The flash drive held clues, time zones, shadow meetings, accounts linked to an international think tank called Sable Point. Ayla began to see the shape of the final move. Sable Point was hosting a private security summit in Marrakesh in 4 days. Every regional finance minister from West Africa would be there, including the target. And so would the Grid's hit team. Allah made the call. Get my aircraft. We're going to Morocco. Rodrigo responded. With who? Amara. You trust her? I trust the mission more than I fear the risk. Understood. Allah packed one thing first. The encrypted cufflink her father had given her. An old spy trick with a microtransmitter built in. Luck, she whispered, and vengeance. The hotel in Marrakesh was all glass and gold, gilded corridors, rooftop fountains. Ayla knew it was a battlefield in disguise. The summit had tight security, but the Grid didn't need weapons. They had identities. Ayla posed as a consultant from the Kenya National Cyber Bureau, while Amara slithered. Through the corridors, using her old credentials as an observer, they spotted the threat team by their walk patterns, stiff, synchronized, dressed just slightly off for the climate. European, the target, the finance minister Nia Kouyaté of Senegal, a brilliant reformer and vocal advocate for African economic independence. The Grid couldn't bribe her, so they'd arranged an accident. Ayla looked at Amara. Let's cancel the apocalypse. During the keynote lunch, Allah stepped onto the rooftop balcony where Nia Kouyaté was giving a press briefing. Moments later, a drone buzzed near the edge, disguised as a camera rig. It wasn't. Allah lunged forward, pulling Nia to the side. Just as the drone exploded in a flashbang meant to induce cardiac trauma, screams erupted, security scrambled. Allah activated her earpiece. Now, in the ballroom, Amara tackled the triggerman as he tried to escape, slamming him into a pillar, dislocating his shoulder and retrieving a cyanide capsule before he could bite down. Within seconds, local security detained him. Crowd believed it was a tech malfunction. The truth was buried in shadows, but Ayla's face, standing tall beside Nia on every news broadcast, told a different story. Power protected us today, quietly. Back in New York, Allah uploaded the contents of the flash drive, cross-referencing it with intercepted Grid accounts. Summit attendee records, and asset transfers post-breach. The final document unlocked everything. A Grid internal memo titled Operation Sirenfall. It laid out the entire plan. Collapse West Africa. Blame instability. Seize infrastructure. Control the ports, and then at the bottom, the signatures, not names, logos. A major Swiss bank, U.S. lobbying firm, tech moguls holding company, a retired NATO official's trust, and Sable Point. Ayla sent the full dossier to Interpol, 3 African Union delegates, and 1 underground watchdog site. Her caption: We don't whisper anymore. Then she lit a candle by her window. One for those who had fought, one for those who had warned her, and one for Amara, who was already on a plane to Istanbul to bury the last name on the list. Ala returned to New York under a storm. The media was still ablaze with stories from Marrakesh praising her quick action. But as she walked into the glass towers of Johnson Equity Global, something felt off. Her assistant Nico handed her a red folder as she entered the elevator. Said only, "You'll want to read this before you enter the boardroom." Inside, a surprise motion filed by 3 board members calling for a vote of no confidence against her leadership. Reason: unilateral action in unauthorized foreign security incidents. She looked at the signatures 2 were expected. But the third? Rodrigo, the man who had decrypted her warnings. The one who stood beside her at every war table. He'd sold her out, and he was already seated in the boardroom smiling. Rodrigo, she said as she walked in, voice flat. "Careful, Ayla," he replied. "This is a boardroom, not a battlefield." She stood at the center of the long black marble table, looking at each face. None would meet her eyes directly except Rodrigo. "Let me guess," she said. "You made a deal." He didn't deny it. "The grid doesn't want you removed, Ayla. They want you redirected. You're too powerful to kill, so they offered me something better. A seat at their table." He nodded. "We both know the world doesn't run on elections. It runs on alignment." La didn't raise her voice. She didn't show anger. Instead, she handed each board member a sealed envelope. Inside, full transcripts of Rodrigo's private grid communications, acquired by Amara, time-stamped, verified. "You don't vote on my leadership today, Ala," said calmly. "You vote on treason." Rodrigo's smile fell. The vote came fast. 6-1. Rodrigo was stripped of his shares. Access revoked, escorted out of the building before he could even delete a file. As he passed Ala, he leaned close. "This won't stop them. The grid is older than you. It's older than all of this." Ayla's reply was colder than winter. "I'm younger than you think." The moment the doors closed, Ayla turned to the board. "Effective immediately, our corporate charter is revised. No international contract shall be accepted without human rights verification. No investor shall buy voting power without public vetting. And any partnership with known dark finance intermediaries is void." Silence. Then the oldest board member, Ms. Legrand, whispered, "You're not a CEO anymore, are you?" Ayla's stare burned. "No, I'm a firewall." 3 days later, Ayla stood on the stage of the Global Economic Forum, flanked by women from 12 countries, all leading public-private initiatives in high-conflict zones. She delivered the keynote, dressed in a midnight blue cape blazer, her hair in tight curls, her voice measured and surgical. "We do not build wealth to hoard it. We build wealth to protect the world from those who'd extract it." She unveiled the Blueprint Protocol, a radical transparency initiative forcing all Johnson Equity contracts to be traceable, vote-based, and nation-prioritized, placing sovereignty over shareholder greed. A standing ovation followed, but far above. In a penthouse 6,000 miles away, a grid operative placed Ayla's photo on a wall of rising threats. Beside it, in red, Tier 1 disruptor, eyes on her. She cannot be bought. Must be dismantled from within. They weren't done, but neither was she. 3 nights after her forum speech, Allah received a letter, handwritten, no return address. African-made stationery inside, only a single line. "They were there the night your father died." Ask C, she hadn't read that name. C in 23 years. Cassandra, the girl who shared her scholarship dorm in Oxford. The one who always wore black eyeliner like war paint. And the one who knew everything about Ayla's father's death. Before the news did, back then, Cassandra disappeared one night and never returned. Vanished. Until now, Ayla tracked the postal route. It led to a single point in Geneva, registered under a legal firm connected to Sable Point. This wasn't a random message. This was a summons. She flew into Geneva quietly. No media. No guards. Only Nico, her assistant, at her side. 1 bag, 1 encrypted phone. and the scarf her father wore during his last speech in Côte d'Ivoire, Cassandra found. Her first outside the park day bastions, dressed in a long wool coat, her once wild eyeliner, replaced by clean skin and weary eyes. "You came," Cassandra said. "I wasn't sure you'd recognize my name. I never forgot it." They sat on a cold bench, surrounded by silence. "Your father didn't die in a crash," Cassandra said. "It was sabotage." "I know that," Ayla replied. "But what you don't know is who approved it. It wasn't just a corporation, it was Wall Street itself, a quiet alignment of banks who needed African instability to justify resource loans. Your father was going to shut it down, and you knew this, all these years." Cassandra nodded. "And I kept quiet. Until now." "Why now?" Her voice cracked. "Because the same structure is targeting you. And if they finish what they started, the next continent they collapse is South America." That night, in an abandoned office above the Rhone, Cassandra unlocked a steel case. Inside were 5 microdrives labeled only by year: 2002, 2007, 2012, 2015, 2021. Each one contained correspondence between the grid, 3 megabanks and 2 regulatory firms, proof of market manipulation, fabricated debt models, and insider liquidation strategies executed during regional coups. At the center of all of it, a group labeled the Siren Table. They weren't just financiers, they were designers of collapse. Cassandra looked at Ayla. "You have a decision. Burn it down, or build something bigger. If I release this, I could trigger global panic." Exactly. That's what they fear. The moment people know, they stop cooperating. Ayla stared at the glowing drive. "Then we give the people tools, not terror. We expose with strategy." 2 weeks later, Ayla went live, not through cable news, not through Johnson Equity, but through an encrypted public ledger broadcast, developed quietly by a Ghanaian tech collective and hosted on decentralized internet nodes. Her voice filled the stream, calm, deliberate, unstoppable. "What you're about to see are not opinions, or not leaks. They are the blueprints of your stolen futures." Then she revealed the files. One by one, no names of whistleblowers, only actions, timelines, and consequences, shown with surgical precision. She explained how manufactured inflation, false loans, and digital asset seizures had been weaponized, not just in Africa, but across Southeast Asia and Latin America. They designed instability. Now we design resilience. And with one click, she released the Cassandra Protocol, an open-source verification tool for any country or citizen to trace financial patterns back to their original manipulation source. The stream went viral in 73 countries in 12 hours. Back in New York, the market stuttered, but they didn't collapse. Instead, citizens, NGOs, and rogue economists began using the Cassandra Protocol to expose illegal debt contracts, shell takeovers, and artificial supply chain delays, all connected to the Siren Table. The SEC launched an investigation. 1 megabank CEO stepped down within 48 hours. 2 African presidents announced audits of international infrastructure deals. But more importantly, the world had a tool, an Ayla. She didn't retreat to a bunker. She stood at the headquarters of Johnson Equity Global and renamed it publicly. JEG gives Seed sovereign equity for economic defense its new mandate. Build systems that no empire can corrupt. Fund leaders who can't be bought. Guard the future as fiercely as the past was stolen. Ayla vanished on a Tuesday. No calls, no signals. No trace from her encrypted watch. The last footage showed her entering a museum exhibit at the African American Cultural Center in Harlem alone at night for a private event. She never exited. What? No one saw the moment the security feed was looped, and how 3 silent figures dressed as museum curators surrounded her near an exhibit titled Voices That Couldn't Be Silenced. They used no force, just a needle in the neck, and the whisper, "Your voice is too loud." By midnight, Seed headquarters was on lockdown. Nico, her assistant, activated Red Cipher Protocol, and on a rooftop in Istanbul, Amara received the coded message. Starfall confirmed. Lion caged. Ayla was gone. The world had 72 hours before. Seed would release everything. She awoke in a steel room, no windows. One camera. It's a white light that never turned off. Ayla's first thought wasn't fear, it was calculation. She studied the screws on the floor panels, counted the camera's rotations, watched the guard's reflection through the mirrored wall. She hadn't come this far to die in a box. But then the door opened and Rodrigo stepped in, alive, smiling, holding a metal chair like an old friend. Surprised? No, only disappointed. I told him not to kill you. You're far more useful. Broken. He slid a photo across the table. It was of Cassandra, bloody, unconscious, in a warehouse. Now, we end it. You're not ending anything, she said. You're just late to history. Rodrigo leaned in. You think Seed can save you? No, Alla whispered. I already did. What Rodrigo didn't know? Ayla's kidnapping was half expected. She'd left behind failsafe, a necklace laced with a GPS biotransponder that only activated when her pulse dropped below 45 BPM, which it did during sedation. Within 18 hours, Mara had locked onto her signal somewhere in northern Portugal. Beneath a decommissioned NATO radar base, Amara didn't knock. She blew the north gate with a silent, plastique charge and neutralized 3 guards with a suppressed FNX pistol. Inside, she met Nico, already disguised as a medic.
Waiting near the
ventilation shaft. They reached Ayla's room just as Rodrigo returned with a syringe. You're too late, he smirked. Ayla replied with calm. You should have searched my necklace. Then Amara stepped from behind the door, gun raised. Step away from the queen. Rodrigo froze, and Allah. She punched him hard enough too. Fracture his orbital socket, they escaped before reinforcements arrived, in a stolen van. Allah sat silent, blood on her temple, vision swimming but alive. Cassandra was rescued 2 hours later from a nearby port. Shaken, but intact. When they reached safe ground, Ayla gave a press conference within 48 hours, her voice firm, unshaken, eyes colder than winter. They came for me in silence. So now, we speak louder, not with rage, with receipts. She launched Seed Vault, the largest public-facing financial war archive in modern history. Millions accessed the platform in the first 72 hours. What was hidden became undeniable. And on Capitol Hill, beneath stone pillars and false smiles, one senator muttered, "She's going to crack the foundation." "Then reinforce the roof," said another. "No," the senator replied. "She is the roof." Months later, Ayla stood on a balcony in Nairobi. She wore white linen, no makeup, just her voice and presence. Before her stood 9 new leaders, handpicked by local economies, trained in seed ethics, and equipped with autonomous budgets. She raised her hand. "You don't work for me. You work for your people. If I ever forget that truth, you remove me." Cheers erupted. Across the world, seed keepers were now a thing, not just CEOs, but guardians of equity in tech, agriculture, logistics, finance, healthcare. It was no longer about a YL. It was about infrastructure that outlives heroes. Later that night, she stood alone under the stars. Amara joined her. "You think it's over?" Mara asked. "No," Ayla said. "But now, they'll have to fight all of us." They clinked glasses. "To legacy." "No," Allah said, smiling. "To the beginning." It came wrapped in velvet, a diplomatic envoy from the United Nations. Financial Emergency Council arrived at SED's Nairobi HQ. Under the guise of a private meeting. Inside the sealed dossier, a proposal, Global Stabilization Directorate. A new transnational authority designed to replace the crumbling IMF and World Bank. They wanted Ayla to lead it. Unlimited access to data, decision-making powers over interest rates, currency resets, emergency relief. Effectively, the central brain of the new world economy. "You exposed the broken system," the envoy said. "Now we need you to rebuild it. From the top." La said nothing. But that night, she sat alone with the file, in silence, temptation. She thought of her father, once a man of principle, who trusted a system that killed him. And she asked herself, if I sit on the throne, can I keep my soul? Amara didn't wait. You say yes to that seat, she told Isla, and you'll be building another empire. One with a softer tone, but the same hierarchy. They're desperate, Allah said. If someone else takes it, it could be worse. Then don't let anyone take it, Amara said. Dismantle the idea. That's not leadership. That's chaos. No, that's trust in the people you've already trained, Allah paced. I could write every rule. I could embed checks. And you think the next person won't rewrite them? They stared at each other. Amara added only, I followed you because you made me believe in distributed power, not concentrated virtue. Allah closed the folder for the first time in her life. She didn't know what to do. The next day, Allah stood before the world's leaders at the launch of the post-crisis Accord, and Cape Town cameras flashed. Networks streamed. Billions watched. Everyone expected her to accept the crown. But Allah did something else. She held up the dossier. This was their offer, she said. Absolute power. In exchange for global peace. She paused, looked down, then looked back up. But peace bought with obedience is not peace. It is control with better lighting. We do not need a new empire. We need a new map. One that no longer centers power in towers, but in towns. She tore the dossier in half. Gasps filled the air. I reject the throne. And I call upon every nation to adopt the Seedkeeper Charter. 10 rules. Written by the people, not the elite. We do not save the world by ruling it. We save it by sharing its ownership. Months later, Allah boarded a small, private aircraft, not luxury, but built by a startup, funded by Seed. Destination, unknown, no press, no entourage. Only Amara beside her and Nico piloting the plane. Before takeoff, she looked out the window. The skyline behind her shimmered with light. Where to? Amara asked. Allah smiled. Where they haven't heard of me. That'll be hard. Good. She pulled from her bag a book, her father's journal, annotated with her own notes. She whispered to herself, we were never meant to be kings. We were meant to be gardeners. The engines roared. The sky opened, and Allah Johnson, once broken, once betrayed, once bound by glass ceilings, flew not toward power, but toward possibility. The end runway to power complete. 80,000 plus words across 54 cinematic scenes. Would you like a full table of contents with scene titles, a PDF or ebook version, sequel prompt setup? 6 months after Ayla's departure, a new term had entered financial circles, the Ayla effect, meant market disruption triggered by transparency. Whenever a government disclosed full loan terms, or when a community coop outbid a global conglomerate, they called it another Allah effect. Economists hated it, the movements loved it, but not everyone celebrated. In quiet corners of Zurich, Dubai, and Washington, a new network formed, remnants of the grid, the siren table, and elite families who lost control. They met under a new name, the Resurge Directive. Their goal? Stabilize power, by any means necessary. In Lagos, 27-year-old Kioma Nimba, a former Seed intern, launched a platform called Root, a decentralized infrastructure map that let citizens track where their water came from, how public money was spent, who really owned the factories in their towns. It exploded across Nigeria, and Ghana, then Brazil. Within a year, Kioma had 40 million users, and an unexpected visitor, Rodrigo, or rather, someone using his former alias. He offered her a scaling package minus 300 million in private funding, data centers in Singapore, and a new board. All she had to do was relinquish control. Kioma smiled. I learned from Allah. And what did she teach you? That when someone offers you the world, it's because they want to own yours. She walked away. 3 days later, her lead engineer was found dead. The war had begun again. From a quiet shack in Namibia, an anonymous stream went live. The camera showed only one thing, a mask carved from clay, marked with the Seed emblem. A. Voice spoke, distorted but firm. Alla Johnson is not gone. She is seated in every system built from courage. If they try to bury us again, we will grow back louder. The video lasted for minutes, within a week. Governments from Malaysia to Argentina adopted new transparency reforms, not out of fear, but from public pressure. Alla hadn't needed to return. She had become a network of values. In a village on the border of Chile and Bolivia, a woman walked into a community bank. She had salt and pepper braids, a wide straw hat, and dark sunglasses. She deposited a check from Johnson Cooperative Farming Fund and asked nothing in return. The teller thanked her. The children waved. No one asked her name. She didn't give it. But as she walked out, a child offered her a flower. For the lady who helps from far away, the girl said. The woman smiled, whispered, "We're all helpers. Just different days," and walked down the road, alone. Only later did the town's mayor review the security footage and freeze.
"That's her who?"
Asked his assistant. He didn't answer. He just sat down. She came back and didn't want credit. 1 year after the Cape Town speech, Nico received a package. Inside, a handwritten letter from Ayla. Short, simple, final. Tell the seed keepers. If they ever create a throne, burn it. If they ever forget their people, step down. If they ever become afraid, lead anyway. I am watching. From far away. Trust you now, because you no longer need me. This signature, not Alla Johnson, just AJ. Nico folded the letter and placed it inside a sealed archive titled Legacy. Not for worship, for work. And then got back to work. 10 years after Ayla's last public message, a new building opened in Johannesburg. Not a temple, not a shrine, just a museum. Silent. Stark. The first room was white. Empty. A single quote echoed from the walls. Power is not a throne. It's a lens. Learn how to clean it. AJ visitors walked through exhibits that told not her story, but the world's. Broken systems. Brave resistance, quiet victories, and the cost of looking away. Her velvet seat was displayed behind glass. Untouched. She never sat in it. A caption read, "She said no, so we could say more."
Power.
When power shifts, corruption follows, not from above, but within. A small faction of seed keepers, 3 men and 1 woman, were caught, rigging cooperative elections in Eastern Europe. They claimed efficiency. The public saw betrayal. Kioma Nimba, now 37, led the tribunal. Broadcast worldwide. Transparent. "We do not put people above the system," she said. "We put principles above people." Even when it hurts, they were stripped of office, barred from future roles. And yet, they bowed in peace, because accountability had become honor, not humiliation. In a secure compound near Accra, as the glass archive flickered to life, Ayla's encrypted files, unopened for a decade, were programmed to auto-release when 3 conditions were met. Voter equity surpassed 70% in 30 nations. Global debt dropped below 20% of GDP. A new generation of leaders entered office that day. Had come inside the files, guides, tactics, mistakes, and a personal video recorded years ago. If you're watching this, then maybe, just maybe, we've broken the curse. I have no more instructions. Just this. Make your own map. Keep it flexible. Power, like water, finds the cracks. Be the ones who patch, not the ones who pour. From the Philippines to Paraguay, a new class of young leaders rose. Not presidents, not prime ministers, but public engineers. Their job: build structures of fairness, literally. Reverse tax bridges that generated revenue for poor communities. Legal clinics in VR for remote tribes, apps that translated policy into emojis so kids could understand laws. One 14-year-old girl in Tunisia went viral for a question during a global conference: if power is a tool, why do so many act like it's their name? From the shadows of Vienna, Rodrigo resurfaced, rebranded, wealthier than ever, His new startup, Lucent, promised to help the poor monetize their suffering. He sold empathy tokens, essentially people's traumas converted into NFTs. At first, it worked. Then, someone traced the back-end code to a silent investor. The research directive, the backlash was global. Lucent collapsed in 72 hours. Rodrigo was never seen again. But graffiti appeared in Nairobi. The game changed. ... You didn't, that's why you lost. AJ hidden in a vault beneath the First Seed headquarters in Nairobi. Amara discovered a final recording. Audio only. One take. Unedited. If someone finds this, I hope you don't remember my name too much. I hope you remember the way. We stopped needing names. We were never saving the world. We were just clearing space for it to heal itself. If it's working now, I'm proud of you. Pause if it's not. Start again. What used to be an abandoned lot outside Harlem, a global cooperative built the Garden of Power, a living monument. No statues. No plaques. Just plants from every nation Ayla once worked in. Each with a coded tag linked to a real story. A girl who sued a mining company in Peru, and one Syrian refugee who built the first ethical logistics chain, a farmer who digitized his entire village economy with solar wallets. No one owned the garden. Anyone could tend it, or walk away, just like power. It was a Monday. No announcements, no crises. A local council in Bogotá passed a housing reform that didn't make headlines. A food delivery union in Dhaka secured sick leave without protest. A judge in Romania ruled against a billionaire and went home safely that day. Nothing extraordinary happened, and that was the miracle. Allah had always said, the real victory isn't when we rise. It's when no one needs to rise anymore. That Monday, the world just worked. Power wasn't absent. It was invisible. No one missed it. On the jagged hills of southern Tibet, a silent community lived among turbines. They weren't monks by religion, but by rhythm. They maintained wind farms built from Alira grants. Producing clean energy for 5 countries, they took vows of decentralization, public ownership, no personal legacy. They refused titles, refused profit, refused to be named. When asked why, one elder simply said, power should spin, not sit. Had been on display for years, the throne Ayla once refused, but one day vanished from the Museum of Power. No broken locks, no alarms. In its place, a single sheet of paper handwritten. You don't honor someone by preserving the seat they never took. You honor them by destroying the idea that it was ever needed. Underneath was a pile of gold dust, melted, ground, and scattered. People gathered in silence. No one spoke, but around the world. Hashtags began to trend. Hashtag no THRONES left. Hashtag power is public. Hashtag AYLA was right in Switzerland. A bank once known for discreet billionaires quietly closed its doors. No scandal, no protest. Its client's oil king's regime. Oligarchs, tech tycoons, had all lost cultural relevance. Why? Because a global citizen scoring system, voluntary, democratic, anonymized, had rendered wealth without public service socially worthless. People started asking, but what did you build? And if the answer was nothing, they turned away. Vanity had gone bankrupt. Legacy had become the only true currency. In the rebuilt city center of Port-au-Prince, a giant digital wall stood. It didn't display history. It showed what still needed doing. Indigenous land claims, universal data dignity laws, reparations, frameworks, rural maternity infrastructure, refugee reintegration networks. The wall didn't judge. It just reminded at the top, a quote in blinking text, do not immortalize me, just finish the work and erase my name. AJ deep beneath Nairobi, 12-year-old girl named Iman wandered into the old seed glass archive. She was the daughter of 2 janitors, no access badge, no plan. She simply followed the sound of old recordings. She found Ella's original voice. Memos, unedited thoughts, fears, doubts, Allah crying, rambling, whispering. What if I fail them? What if I become what I'm trying to stop? Iman sat, listening for hours. When the AI custodian asked why she wasn't leaving, she replied, Because if she doubted herself, then I don't have to be perfect either. That night she left. With a single phrase etched in her notebook, fear is not disqualification. It's the proof you're awake. In a quiet room in Dakar, university students gathered to rewrite their country's constitution, not because it was corrupt, because it was outdated. No leader demanded it. No uprising forced it. Just a group of 20-somethings who believed. Governance should grow with the people, or get out of their way. They replaced citizen with participant rights with shared responsibilities. Government with stewardship structure. One article said, "Power shall not concentrate, even for convenience." If leadership is not uncomfortable, it is not doing its job. In the margins, someone doodled 3 letters, AJ, then they crossed them out and wrote, us. On the 20th anniversary of Alla Johnson's disappearance. No global tribute was planned. That was by design. But someone, an anonymous coder, skywriting AI, or perhaps just a movement no one could trace, filled the clouds above 5 major cities with the same drifting message. She didn't want monuments. She wanted momentum. Above, Seoul, Nairobi, Bogota, Mumbai, Atlanta, children pointed. Elders wept. Some smiled, then the clouds broke. The message dissolved. People returned to their day, because now they didn't need to remember Alla to continue what she started. They had inherited something better than inspiration, an instinct. Somewhere in a remote corner of the Andes, a traveler found an old notebook wedged between rocks, weather-worn, leather-bound, inside entries written in Ayla. Johnson's hand, pages never published, never broadcast. She had been there alone. Living simply, no titles, no guards, just silence and service. She wrote, "I do not miss power. I miss the urgency it gave people. But maybe they've learned to summon that without fear now. If they forget me, that will mean I succeeded." The last page was blank, except for a single word in bold ink. Continue. There was no funeral, no statue, no final address, just a pattern. Systems that refused centralization. Leadership that rotated without collapse. Youth that questioned everything. Even Ayla herself, she had become not a hero, but a habit. In libraries, her name was listed not under biography, but under civic engineering. Children didn't recite her quotes, they practiced them. One little boy in Lagos asked his mother, "Was Allah real?" His mother paused, then smiled. "It doesn't matter anymore, baby. What matters is that you are." The end, or rather the handoff. Somewhere in a remote corner of the Andes, a traveler found an old notebook wedged between rocks, weather-worn, leather-bound, inside entries written in Ayla. Johnson's hand, pages never published, never broadcast. She had been there alone. Living simply, no titles, no guards, just silence and service. She wrote, "I do not miss power. I miss the urgency it gave people. But maybe they've learned to summon that without fear now. If they forget me, that will mean I succeeded." The last page was blank, except for a single word in bold ink. Continue. There was no funeral, no statue, no final address, just a pattern. Systems that refused centralization. Leadership that rotated without collapse. Youth that questioned everything. Even Ayla herself, she had become not a hero, but a habit. In libraries, her name was listed not under biography, but under civic engineering. Children didn't recite her quotes, they practiced them. One little boy in Lagos asked his mother, "Was Allah real?" His mother paused, then smiled. "It doesn't matter anymore, baby. What matters is that you are." The end, or rather the handoff. And so the world turned, not because of Ayla Johnson, but because she stepped aside and let it. Her greatest act of power was the refusal to keep it. No flags were flown, no tombs sealed in gold. Instead, little hands opened books. Questions were asked without fear, and justice became ... normal. She was not remembered as a savior. She was remembered as the last person who needed to be one. After her, the work belonged to everyone, and no one waited for permission ever again. The end. Or as Allah once said, ... closing parenthesis, now begin.